The scream that tore from Katherine Dawson's throat wasn't one of fear but pure exasperation as the massive hound knocked her flat on her back for the third time that morning, his tongue slobbering across her face with enthusiastic abandon. "Down, you beast! Sit, stay, anything!" Katherine sputtered, pushing against 70 pounds of unruly dog that seemed to think she was the world's most entertaining toy. The June sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty ground behind the barn, where she'd been trying to make herself useful for the past hour. And now her traveling dress was covered in dirt and dog hair, her carefully pinned hair falling loose around her shoulders. It was 1882, and Katherine had arrived in Willits, California just 2 days prior, carrying everything she owned in a single worn carpet bag, and clinging to the last threads of dignity a woman could maintain when she'd lost absolutely everything else. The stagecoach ride from San Francisco had been brutal, jostling her over rutted roads through redwood forests and into this scrubby valley, where cattle ranches sprawled across the landscape like kingdoms unto themselves. She'd come looking for work, any work, at the largest ranch in the area, owned by a man she'd only heard referred to as the Prescott fellow. The ranch hands she'd approached that morning had laughed her right off the property, making crude jokes about what kind of work a woman like her could do. She'd been walking back toward town, defeated and terrified about where she'd sleep that night since her meager funds had run out, when she'd spotted this enormous dog tangled in a length of rope near an old barn, whining pitifully. Katherine had always had a way with animals. Back in Boston, before her father's business collapsed and he'd drunk himself to death, before her stepmother had thrown her out with nothing but contempt and those terrible words still ringing in her ears, she'd raised 3 dogs from puppies and trained them beautifully. It was one of the few skills she possessed that seemed even remotely useful in this harsh western landscape. So she'd stopped and untangled the beast, speaking softly to calm him. The dog, a rangy mixed breed with what looked like hound and shepherd in him, had immediately bonded to her like she'd saved his life instead of just his leg. Unfortunately, gratitude and obedience were apparently 2 very different things in his simple mind. "You're supposed to sit when I say sit," Katherine informed the dog firmly, managing to scramble to her feet. She brushed off her dress, knowing it was a losing battle. "Let's try this again. Sit." The dog wagged his tail so hard his entire back end wiggled, then jumped up to plant his paws on her shoulders. "That's the opposite of sitting." But Katherine couldn't help laughing, even as she stumbled backward. There was something earnest and sweet about the animal's complete lack of manners. "All right, we'll start smaller. Give me your paw." She reached for his front leg, and to her surprise, the dog actually let her lift it, his tail wagging slowed to a more controlled wag. "Good boy. See, you can learn." Katherine felt a small surge of hope. She released his paw and held out her hand. "Paw." The dog stared at her, head tilted. "Paw," she repeated more firmly. His ears perked up and he lifted his right paw slightly. "Yes, paw." Katherine grabbed the paw and shook it enthusiastically. "Good dog, such a good boy." She was so focused on the small victory that she didn't hear the footsteps approaching behind her until a deep voice, rich with amusement, said, "Well, I'll be damned. You got Rufus to do something other than cause mayhem." Katherine spun around so fast she nearly lost her balance. Standing not 10 feet away, leaning against the barn with his arms crossed, was quite possibly the most striking man she'd ever seen. He was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that filled out his dusty blue shirt in a way that made her mouth go dry. Dark hair curled slightly at his collar beneath a worn Stetson, and even from this distance she could see his eyes were an unusual shade of amber brown, sharp and intelligent as they studied her. A day's worth of stubble shadowed his strong jaw, and when he pushed off from the barn and walked closer, he moved with the easy confidence of a man completely at home in his own skin. "I'm sorry," Katherine said quickly, heat flooding her cheeks. "I found him tangled up and I thought I was helping, but then he wouldn't leave me alone and I didn't mean to trespass. I'll just go, hold on." The man held up a hand, and Katherine's words died in her throat. He was looking at her with open curiosity now, his gaze traveling from her disheveled hair to her dirty dress to the dog actually sitting at her feet, looking up at her with complete adoration. "How long you been working with him?" "Working with him? I only untangled him about an hour ago." "Maybe less." Katherine twisted her hands together, trying not to feel quite so aware of how awful she must look. "He's very enthusiastic." A smile tugged at the corner of the man's mouth, and Katherine felt something flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with fear or hunger or any of the emotions that had been her constant companions these past months. Enthusiastic. That's a kind word for it. He walked closer, and Katherine caught the scent of leather and sage and honest sweat. "I've had that dog for 6 months, and he's been nothing but trouble. Won't listen to a damn thing anyone says. We've tried everything short of well. Never mind what we've tried. Point is, you got him to shake hands in an hour. That's more than anyone else has managed." Katherine looked down at Rufus, who was still sitting perfectly, his tail sweeping the dust behind him. She felt a small swell of pride despite her circumstances. "He's smart," she said. "Just needed someone to be patient with him." The man's eyes met hers, and Katherine felt the full force of his attention like a physical thing. Up close, she could see tiny lines at the corners of his eyes, the kind that came from squinting into the sun, and a small scar above his left eyebrow. He couldn't be more than 28 or 29, she guessed, which made him perhaps 7 years older than her own 21 years. "I'm Quinn Prescott," he said, and Katherine's heart sank straight through the ground. Of course. Of course he was the owner, the man whose ranch hands had laughed her away this morning. She probably looked like some desperate fool trying to work her way into his good graces through his dog. "Katherine Dawson," she managed, lifting her chin even as embarrassment burned through her. "I apologize for the intrusion, Mr. Prescott. I'll be on my way." "You looking for work, Miss Dawson?" The question stopped her mid-turn. She looked back at him, trying to read his expression, but his face had gone thoughtful and unreadable. "I was," she admitted, seeing no point in lying. "Your men made it clear this morning that there wasn't any work for someone like me." Something flashed in Quinn's eyes, quick and hot. "Did they now? What exactly did they say?" "Nothing that bears repeating." Katherine kept her voice level. She'd heard worse in the past 6 months. "They weren't wrong, I suppose. I don't know anything about ranching or cattle. I can cook, but you probably have a cook. I can clean and keep house, but I imagine that position is filled as well." Quinn didn't respond immediately. He looked at Rufus again, then back at her, and Katherine could practically see him thinking something through. "Tell me something, Miss Dawson. Where'd you learn to train dogs?" "Boston. I grew up there, and my father had hunting dogs." The memory ached, bittersweet. "I trained 3 of them myself, from puppies. They could sit, stay, heel, retrieve, everything you could want from a good dog." "And what brings a dog trainer from Boston to a cattle ranch in California?" Katherine hesitated. The true answer was too complicated, too painful, and too humiliating to share with a stranger, even one with kind eyes and a voice that made her want to trust him. "Circumstances," she said finally. "Bad luck and worse timing. I need work, Mr. Prescott, and I'm not particular about what kind. I'm a hard worker and I'm honest. That's about all I can offer." Quinn was quiet for a long moment, his gaze still locked on hers. Then he looked down at Rufus, who had broken his sit to lean against Catherine's legs, gazing up at her with complete devotion. "If you can train him," Quinn said slowly, "you can work here." Catherine's breath caught. "I'm sorry, what, Rufus? If you can train him properly, get him to actually listen and behave like a proper ranch dog instead of a menace, I'll give you a job and a place to stay." Quinn's amber eyes found hers again. 3 meals a day, a room in the main house. My housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, could use help anyway. Her arthritis has been acting up, and wages. $30 a month to start. $30 a month. It was more than Katherine had dared hope for. It was salvation in the form of a job offer she barely understood. "You're serious," she said, searching his face for any sign of mockery or ulterior motive. "You'd hire me to train your dog?" "I'd hire you to train him and help Mrs. Chen with whatever she needs. Cooking, cleaning, mending, whatever she asks. But yes, primarily I want Rufus trained. He's got good bloodlines, should be excellent for hunting and helping with the herd, but he's useless the way he is now. My men refuse to work with him, and I don't have the time or patience to do it myself." Quinn held out his hand. "What do you say, Miss Dawson? Do we have a deal?" Katherine stared at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong, offering her everything she desperately needed. It seemed too good to be true, which meant it probably was. But what choice did she have? She could refuse and be on the streets tonight, or she could take the chance and at least have food and shelter while it lasted. She placed her hand in his, feeling the warm strength of his grip, and tried to ignore the way her pulse jumped at the contact. "We have a deal, Mr. Prescott." His smile was slow and genuine, transforming his serious face into something almost boyish. "Call me Quinn. If you're going to be working here, might as well skip the formalities." He released her hand, and Katherine felt the loss of that warmth immediately. "Come on, I'll show you to the house and introduce you to Mrs. Chen. Fair warning, she's going to mother you within an inch of your life." "That sounds wonderful, actually," Katherine said honestly, and was rewarded with another smile. "Rufus, come," Quinn said, and the dog immediately bounded after him, completely ignoring the command in favor of circling back to Katherine. Quinn laughed, a rich sound that did dangerous things to Katherine's equilibrium. "See what I mean? He's hopeless. Good luck, Miss Dawson. Something tells me you're going to need it." As Katherine followed Quinn Prescott toward the sprawling ranch house with Rufus dancing at her heels, she couldn't help but feel like her luck might finally be changing. She had no way of knowing that the next few months would challenge everything she thought she knew about herself, about trust, about home, and about the terrifying, wonderful thing it meant to open your heart to someone when you'd sworn you'd never be vulnerable again. The ranch house was larger than Katherine had expected. A 2-story structure built from redwood with a wide wraparound porch that offered shade from the relentless California sun. Quinn led her through the front door into a surprisingly cool interior, and Katherine's first impression was one of comfortable masculinity mixed with touches of unexpected warmth. The furniture was solid and well made, the floors clean despite the dust that must constantly blow in, and through a doorway she could see a kitchen where an older Chinese woman was kneading bread dough with methodical precision. "Mrs. Chen," Quinn called out, and the woman looked up with a smile that crinkled the corners of her dark eyes. "Got someone I'd like you to meet, Mrs." Chen wiped her hands on her apron as she emerged from the kitchen, her assessing gaze traveling over Katherine with the same thoroughness Quinn's had, though with considerably more maternal concern. "This girl needs a bath and a proper meal, Mrs." Chen announced in accented but perfectly clear English. "Also new dress. That one is ruined." "This is Katherine Dawson," Quinn said, and Katherine detected amusement in his voice. "She's going to be helping you around the house and training Rufus. Katherine, this is Mrs. Chen. She's been keeping this place running for the past 5 years, and she doesn't stand for any nonsense." "Especially not from you," Mrs. Chen told Quinn, but there was obvious affection in her tone. She turned back to Katherine. "You eat today." Katherine's stomach chose that moment to growl audibly, answering the question for her. She felt her cheeks flame with embarrassment. Mrs. Chen made a tusking sound and immediately took Katherine by the arm. "Come, I make you lunch. You eat, then bath, then we talk about work." "You," she said, pointing at Quinn, "go do ranch things, I take care of this." Quinn held up his hands in surrender, his eyes dancing with laughter. "Yes, madam. Miss Dawson, I'll see you at dinner. Welcome to the ranch." He tipped his hat to her and was gone, leaving Katherine in Mrs. Chen's capable care. The older woman led her to the kitchen and deposited her in a chair at the large wooden table, then immediately began assembling a meal with brisk efficiency. "You come far?" Mrs. Chen asked as she sliced bread and layered it with cold beef and cheese. "From San Francisco." "Before that, Boston. Long way." Mrs. Chen set a plate in front of Katherine along with a glass of cool buttermilk. "Eat. Then you tell me why a Boston girl comes to California ranch with nothing but the dress on her back." Katherine wanted to deflect, to keep her story private, but something about Mrs. Chen's matter-of-fact kindness made her throat tight with emotion. She took a bite of the sandwich and nearly moaned at how good simple food could taste when you were truly hungry. "My father died," Katherine said quietly, the words coming easier than she'd expected. "6 months ago. He had debts, bad investments. Everything was sold to pay what he owed. My stepmother remarried quickly and made it clear I wasn't welcome. I had a little money, enough to get to San Francisco. I thought I could find work there, but—" She shrugged, not wanting to detail the harsh realities of job hunting as a single woman with no family and no references. "It didn't work out. Someone told me there might be work in the smaller towns, so I came here." Mrs. Chen listened without interrupting, her hands busy preparing vegetables for what looked like the evening meal. When Katherine finished, the older woman nodded once. "You have bad luck. Now you have good luck. This is good place, good man." She gestured toward where Quinn had disappeared. "He seems rough, but he has kind heart. Fair boss, you work hard, he take care of you." "I will work hard," Katherine promised. "I'm grateful for the chance. Finish eating, I show you room, then you wash. Tonight at dinner you meet the men who work here, they are—" Mrs. Chen paused, searching for words. "Rough, loud, but mostly good. They try to test you, you stand firm, show no fear." Katherine thought of the men who'd laughed at her that morning and felt her spine straighten. "I can handle myself." "Good." Mrs. Chen smiled approvingly. "I think you and I will get along fine." After Katherine had eaten her fill, Mrs. Chen led her upstairs to a small but clean room at the back of the house. It had a narrow bed, a dresser, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the hills behind the ranch. To Katherine, who had been preparing to sleep in a boarding house dormitory at best or under a tree at worst, it looked like luxury. "This was my daughter's room," Mrs. Chen said softly. "She is married now, lives in Sacramento. You use it, take care of it." "I will," Katherine promised, feeling the weight of that trust. "Thank you, Mrs. Chen, for everything." The older woman patted her arm. "You call me Sue. Mrs. Chen is too formal for every day. I bring you water for bath, and I find you dress that fits better. You rest. Then tonight you start new life." After Sue left, Katherine sank onto the bed and let herself feel the full enormity of what had just happened. She'd come to this ranch desperate and defeated, and in the space of an hour her entire situation had changed. She had work, shelter, food, and even kindness from Sue. And all because she'd stopped to help a tangled dog and Quinn Prescott had happened to see her working with him. Quinn. Katherine let herself think about him now, alone in the privacy of her new room. He was handsome, obviously, in that rugged way Western men often were, but it was more than that. There had been intelligence in his eyes, humor in his smile, and something like respect in the way he'd looked at her when she'd stood her ground and told him honestly what she could offer. He hadn't looked at her like the men in San Francisco had, with calculation and barely concealed lust. He'd looked at her like she was a person with skills he needed, and that small dignity meant more than he could possibly know. "Don't be a fool," she told herself sternly. "He's your employer, nothing more. You have a job to do, and that's all this is. Don't start spinning fantasies about a man you just met, especially one who holds your livelihood in his hands." But even as she thought it, she remembered the warmth of his hand clasping hers, the way his smile had made her heart skip, and she knew she was in trouble. True to her word, Sue brought up water for a bath and left Katherine with a simple blue cotton dress that was only slightly too large, along with a proper corset and undergarments that were clean and mended. Katherine bathed away the dust and sweat of travel, pinned her dark hair back into a neat bun, and dressed in clothes that made her feel almost human again. When she looked at herself in the small mirror above the washstand, she barely recognized the woman staring back. The haunted, desperate look was gone, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. That evening, Sue brought her downstairs for dinner, and Katherine got her first real introduction to ranch life. The dining room was large enough to accommodate a table that sat 12, and it was nearly full. The ranch hands filed in with the kind of easy camaraderie that came from men who worked together daily, their voices loud and their laughter louder. Katherine recognized two of them from that morning, and she saw the moment they recognized her too, their expressions shifting from surprise to something like embarrassment. Quinn sat at the head of the table, and when he saw Katherine, he stood immediately. "Gentlemen, this is Miss Katherine Dawson. She's going to be helping Mrs. Chen and training Rufus. I expect you to treat her with respect and make her feel welcome here. Anyone who has a problem with that can collect their pay and leave tonight." The room went silent, and Katherine felt every eye on her. She kept her chin up and her expression calm, channeling every ounce of her father's stubbornness. "Miss Dawson," Quinn continued, gesturing to the empty chair beside him, "please sit." Katherine made her way to the seat, acutely aware of the scrutiny. As she sat, Quinn introduced the men one by one. There was Thomas, the foreman, a grizzled man in his 50s with kind eyes. William and James, the two who'd laughed at her that morning, both in their 30s and clearly sheepish now. Robert, barely older than Katherine herself, who gave her a shy smile, and several others whose names she tried to commit to memory. The meal was delicious, a hearty stew with fresh bread and vegetables from Sue's garden. The conversation flowed around Katherine as the men discussed the day's work, plans for moving cattle to new grazing land, and concerns about a fence that needed mending. She ate quietly, content to observe, until Quinn turned to her. "How's Rufus settling in?" he asked. "He's in the kitchen with me," Sue answered before Katherine could. "Very good dog now, sits when she tells him to sit." "Already," Thomas looked impressed. "That dog never listened to nobody." "He just needed consistency," Katherine said, finding her voice. "And patience. He's eager to please, just easily distracted." "Well, you'll have your work cut out for you," Quinn said, and Katherine thought she saw approval in his eyes. "But if today was any indication, I made the right choice hiring you." After dinner, Katherine helped Sue clean up despite the older woman's protests that she should rest. But Katherine needed to feel useful, needed to prove her worth. They worked together in comfortable silence, and when the kitchen was clean, Sue shooed her upstairs to rest. Katherine lay in her narrow bed that night, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling down for sleep. She could hear the lowing of cattle in the distance, the occasional whinny of a horse, and closer by, the low murmur of men's voices as the ranch hands retired to the bunkhouse. It was so different from Boston, from the city sounds she'd grown up with, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt like possibility. The next morning, Katherine woke before dawn to the sound of roosters crowing. She dressed quickly and made her way downstairs, where she found Sue already at work preparing breakfast for the men. "You sleep well?" Sue asked. "Better than I have in months," Katherine admitted. "Put me to work. What do you need?" They fell into an easy rhythm, Sue directing and Katherine following, and by the time the ranch hands filed in for breakfast, the table was laden with eggs, bacon, biscuits, and gravy. Quinn was the last to arrive, his hair still damp from washing, and when he saw Katherine serving food alongside Sue, he paused. "You didn't have to start work this early," he said. "I wanted to," Katherine replied. "I meant what I said about being a hard worker." Something shifted in Quinn's expression, something warm and approving that made Katherine's pulse quicken. "I can see that. Thank you, Miss Dawson." After breakfast, while Sue started preparations for the midday meal, Quinn took Katherine out to work with Rufus. The dog bounded up to them immediately, tail wagging so hard his entire body wiggled. "All right, show me what you've got planned," Quinn said, leaning against the fence of the training pen he directed her to. Katherine took a deep breath, trying to ignore how aware she was of Quinn watching her. She focused on Rufus instead, pulling out a piece of bacon she'd saved from breakfast. "The key is consistency and rewards," she explained as she worked. "He needs to understand that good behavior gets him something he wants. Sit, Rufus." The dog sat immediately, his eyes locked on the bacon. Katherine gave it to him with lavish praise. "Good boy. Such a good dog." She looked at Quinn. "You have to make him feel like he's the best dog in the world when he does what you want. They want to please us, they just need to understand what we're asking." For the next hour, Katherine worked with Rufus on basic commands while Quinn watched, asking occasional questions. She taught Quinn how to give the commands himself, how to use the right tone and body language, and was pleased when Rufus responded to Quinn as well. "You're a natural teacher," Quinn observed as they took a break, watching Rufus sniff around the pen. "How'd you learn all this?" "Trial and error mostly," Katherine said. "And reading. My father had books on dog training, hunting techniques. I read everything I could get my hands on." She smiled at the memory, bittersweet as it was. "He used to say I had more patience with the dogs than with people." "Was he right?" Quinn asked, a teasing note in his voice. Katherine considered it. "Sometimes. People are more complicated. Dogs are honest about what they want and need. People hide things, lie, pretend to be something they're not. Sounds like you've been burned before." The observation was too accurate, too close to truths Katherine wasn't ready to share. She busied herself calling Rufus back over. "Haven't we all in one way or another?" Quinn didn't push, which she appreciated. Instead, he said, "Well, for what it's worth, I appreciate honesty. Life's too short for games and pretense. If you ever need anything or have a problem, I want you to tell me directly. None of this suffering in silence nonsense." Katherine looked at him, surprised by the earnestness in his voice. "All right, I can do that." "Good." Quinn pushed off the fence. "I need to get to work, but you keep doing what you're doing with Rufus. He's already better than he's ever been. Meet me here tomorrow morning, same time." "I'll be here," Katherine promised. As Quinn walked away, Katherine couldn't help but watch him go, admiring the easy confidence in his stride. Rufus whined softly, and she looked down to find the dog staring up at her with what looked suspiciously like knowing eyes. "Don't you start," she told him, but she was smiling. The days fell into a pattern. Katherine would rise early and help Sue prepare breakfast, then spend the morning working with Rufus while the ranch hands went about their duties. Afternoons were devoted to helping Sue with household tasks, preparing meals, mending clothes, whatever needed doing. Evenings were communal dinners where she gradually got to know the men who worked the ranch, learning their stories and quirks. Thomas, the foreman, had worked for Quinn's father and stayed on when Quinn inherited the ranch 3 years ago. William and James, the ones who'd laughed at Katherine that first day, had apologized sheepishly within the week, admitting they hadn't thought a woman would actually be hired for ranch work. Robert, the youngest hand, developed a harmless crush on Katherine that made the other men tease him mercilessly, and made Katherine feel oddly protective of the shy young man. But it was Quinn who occupied more of Katherine's thoughts than she cared to admit. He joined her for Rufus's training sessions most mornings, and she found herself looking forward to those hours more than anything else in her day. He was easy to talk to, quick to laugh, and genuinely interested in her techniques. More than that, he shared pieces of his own life with her. She learned that he'd grown up on this ranch, that his mother had died when he was 12 and his father 5 years ago, leaving Quinn to run the place at 24. She learned that he loved this land with a fierce devotion, that he treated his workers fairly and expected hard work in return, and that he had a dry sense of humor that caught her off guard and made her laugh in ways she hadn't laughed in years. "You're good at this," Quinn told her one morning about 3 weeks after she'd arrived, watching as Rufus performed a perfect sit-stay despite the distraction of chickens scratching nearby. "Better than good. You've got a real gift." "Thank you," Katherine said, warmth spreading through her chest at the praise. "Rufus makes it easy. He's smart and eager to learn. He's a different dog than he was a month ago." Quinn reached down to scratch Rufus behind the ears, and the dog leaned into the touch with a contented sigh. "I'm grateful you came along when you did, Katherine." It was the first time he'd used her first name without the miss, and Katherine felt something shift between them, subtle but significant. "I'm grateful you gave me a chance," she replied softly. "Not many men would have." Quinn's amber eyes found hers, and the intensity in them made Katherine's breath catch. "Their loss," he said simply. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Katherine didn't quite dare name. Then Rufus barked, breaking the spell, and Quinn stepped back with a slight cough. "I should get back to work," he said. "But Katherine, I want you to know you've more than earned your place here. This is your home now for as long as you want it to be." After he left, Katherine stood in the training pen, her heart pounding, and tried to convince herself that the flutter in her chest was just gratitude, nothing more. But she was lying to herself, and she knew it. That evening, as she helped Sue prepare dinner, the older woman gave her a knowing look. "You like him," Sue said, and it wasn't a question. Katherine's hands stilled in the carrots she was chopping. "I respect him. He's a good employer. Hum." Sue didn't sound convinced. "And he looks at you like you are sunrise after long night." "Sue," Katherine felt her cheeks flame. We're not. I work for him." "So, my husband was my employer first. I came to work for his family as housekeeper. He was young master. Now we are married 40 years. Sue shrugged as if it were the simplest thing in the world. "The heart wants what it wants. Question is, what does your heart want?" Katherine didn't have an answer for that. Or rather, she did, but she wasn't ready to admit it, not even to herself. The summer heat intensified as June gave way to July. The ranch hummed with activity as cattle were moved to higher pastures, fences mended, and preparations made for the fall roundup. Catherine's days were full and satisfying in ways her old life had never been. She loved working with Rufus, loved the sense of accomplishment when he mastered a new command. She loved helping Sue, learning to cook hearty Western meals so different from the fancy Boston cuisine she'd grown up with. She even loved the physical tiredness that came from honest work, the way her body grew stronger and more capable. But more than anything, she loved the moments she stole with Quinn. He'd taken to joining her not just for morning training sessions, but sometimes in the evening, walking with her around the ranch as the sun set and the air finally cooled. They talked about everything and nothing, her stories of Boston and his of growing up in California, dreams and fears, and the kind of philosophical questions that only emerge in the gentle darkness. "You miss it?" Quinn asked one evening as they walked past the horse barn, Rufus trotting happily between them. "Boston, I mean, the city life." Katherine considered the question honestly. "Sometimes I miss the culture, the theater and music. But I don't miss the pretense, the constant judgment, the way everyone was always performing for everyone else. Out here, people are more honest. I like that. Even the ones who laughed at you when you first arrived." Quinn's tone was light, but Katherine sensed real curiosity beneath it. Even them. They were honest about their doubts, and when they were proven wrong, they were honest about that too. In Boston, people would smile to your face and destroy you behind your back. Katherine shook her head. "I'll take honest skepticism over false friendship any day." Quinn was quiet for a moment, and when he spoke, his voice was serious. "I'm glad you ended up here, Katherine. I know the circumstances that brought you weren't ideal, but I'm selfish enough to be glad anyway." Katherine's heart began to race. "Why?" He stopped walking, turning to face her fully. In the fading light, his features were shadowed, but his eyes caught the last rays of sun, glowing amber. "Because you fit here," he said simply. "Because you've made this place feel more like a home than it has since my mother died. Because Sue smiles more, and the men work harder trying to impress you, and Rufus has become the dog I always knew he could be. Because He paused, seeming to struggle with the words. "Because I look forward to seeing you every day in a way that has nothing to do with your work and everything to do with who you are." Katherine felt like she couldn't breathe. "Quinn, you don't have to say anything," he interrupted quickly. "I know I'm your employer, and that puts you in an awkward position. I'm not trying to make you uncomfortable or take advantage. I just wanted you to know that I value you, not just as someone who works here, but as a person. As a woman, I admire and respect and—" He trailed off, running a hand through his hair in a gesture of frustration. "I'm making a mess of this." "No," Katherine said softly, her heart so full she thought it might burst. "You're not. Quinn, I feel the same way. I have for weeks now, but I didn't think I should say anything because you're right, you are my employer, and I didn't want to presume or make things complicated." Quinn's face lit up with a smile that was pure joy. "You do? You feel the same way?" "Yes." The admission felt like jumping off a cliff, terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "I think about you constantly. I look for excuses to be near you. When you smile at me, I feel like I can do anything. And it scares me because I swore I'd never let myself be vulnerable again. Never trust someone with the power to hurt me. But Quinn, when I'm with you, I feel safe in ways I haven't felt since my father died." Quinn closed the distance between them in 2 strides, his hands coming up to cup her face with a gentleness that made tears spring to Katherine's eyes. "I will never hurt you," he said fiercely. "Katherine, I swear to you, I will spend every day proving that you can trust me. You're not just someone who works for me. You're God, you're everything." Then he kissed her, and Katherine's entire world tilted on its axis. His lips were warm and firm, moving against hers with a tenderness that made her knees weak. She reached up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself, and kissed him back with all the longing she'd been suppressing for weeks. It was perfect and overwhelming and felt like coming home. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I'm courting you," he said, and there was laughter in his voice. "Properly, the way you deserve. I'm going to do this right, Katherine Dawson." "You already are," Katherine whispered and kissed him again. True to his word, Quinn courted her properly over the following weeks, though it was complicated by the fact that they lived in the same house and worked together daily. He brought her wildflowers from the hills, sat beside her at dinner, and walked with her every evening. He was respectful of her reputation, never pushing for more than kisses in the privacy of the evening shadows, but the heat between them built with every touch, every shared glance. The ranch hands noticed, of course. Thomas gave Quinn a knowing smile and told Katherine she was good for him. Sue was insufferably smug, claiming she'd known all along. Even Rufus seemed pleased, as if he'd orchestrated the whole thing by getting tangled in that rope. But it was when Quinn took Katherine into town for the first time, proudly introducing her to the shopkeepers and neighbors as his intended, that Katherine truly understood how serious he was. He bought her fabric for new dresses, insisted on treating her to lunch at the town's small restaurant, and never once left her side. People stared, some with curiosity and some with judgment at the speed of their courtship, but Quinn didn't care. "Let them talk," he told her as they rode back to the ranch in his wagon, the summer sun warm on their faces. "I know what I want, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise to satisfy propriety. Life's too short, Katherine. I lost both my parents young. I learned that you grab happiness when you find it because there's no guarantee tomorrow." "You found happiness with me?" Katherine asked, even though she could see the truth of it in his face. "More than I knew was possible," Quinn said, taking her hand. "Have you found happiness, I mean?" Katherine thought about the girl who'd arrived in Willits just 2 months ago, desperate and alone and terrified. That girl seemed like a stranger now. The woman she'd become was stronger, more confident, and yes, happier than she'd ever been. "Yes," she said simply, "I have." August brought its own challenges. A drought had left the water sources low, and the ranch hands worked long hours ensuring the cattle had enough to drink. Katherine saw less of Quinn during the days, but he still made time for their evening walks, even when he was exhausted from dawn to dusk labor. It was during one of these difficult weeks that Katherine truly came to understand what it meant to be part of a ranch community. When one of the hands, William, was thrown from his horse and broke his arm, everyone pitched in to cover his work. Katherine found herself helping in the barn, learning to feed and water the horses, and discovering she had a knack for it. When Sue came down with a summer cold, Katherine ran the kitchen alone for 3 days, feeding a dozen hungry men 3 meals a day, and somehow managing not to burn anything. "You're tougher than you look," Thomas told her one evening, accepting his 3rd helping of her beef stew. "When you first got here, I figured you'd last a week, maybe 2. City girl like you, I didn't think you had it in you to handle ranch life. I'm man enough to admit I was wrong." "Thank you, Thomas," Katherine said, genuinely touched. "That means a lot." "Quinn's a lucky man," the foreman continued. "You're going to make a fine ranch wife." The words sent a thrill through Katherine. Wife. She and Quinn hadn't talked about marriage explicitly, but the promise of it hung between them like something inevitable and wonderful. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, Katherine found Quinn on the front porch, staring out at the dark landscape. "Can't sleep?" she asked softly, settling beside him on the porch swing. "Too much on my mind," Quinn admitted. He put his arm around her shoulders and Katherine snuggled into his side, breathing in the familiar scent of him. "The drought's worse than I thought. If we don't get rain soon, we're going to have to move the cattle again, and the higher pastures are already overgrazed." "What can I do to help?" Quinn's arm tightened around her. "You're already helping more than you know. Coming home to you every day, having you here, it makes everything else manageable. You're my calm in the storm, Katherine." She turned in his arms to look at him, seeing the worry lines around his eyes, the weight of responsibility he carried. "We'll get through it together," she promised. "Whatever comes, you're not alone anymore." Quinn kissed her then, slow and sweet, and when he pulled back, his eyes were suspiciously bright. "Marry me," he said, and it wasn't a question so much as a plea. "I know it's fast. I know we've only known each other a few months, but Katherine, I love you. I love you so much it terrifies me. Marry me and be my wife and my partner in all of this." Katherine's eyes filled with tears, happy tears, joyful tears. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, Quinn, I'll marry you." "I love you too." They held each other on that porch swing, two people who'd found each other against all odds and planned their future in whispered words and stolen kisses. The drought broke 3 days later with a thunderstorm that rolled in from the coast, bringing blessed rain that soaked the parched earth. Katherine stood on the porch with Sue, watching the ranch hands dance and holler in the downpour, their relief palpable. Quinn found her there, swept her into his arms, and spun her around despite the rain soaking them both. "We're going to make it," he said, laughing. "The ranch, us, all of it. We're going to make it." "I never doubted it," Katherine said, and she meant it. They were married on a Sunday in late September, when the heat had finally broken and the hills had turned golden. The ceremony took place in the small church in Willits, with Sue and Thomas standing up for them and every ranch hand in attendance. Katherine wore a dress she and Sue had sewn together from the finest fabric Quinn had insisted on buying, a simple but elegant creation in cream-colored silk that made her feel like a princess. As she walked down the aisle toward Quinn, seeing the love and awe in his face, Katherine thought about how far she'd come. 6 months ago, she'd been broken and lost, with no future and no hope. Now she had a home, a family in Sue and the ranch hands, a purpose, and most importantly, love. Quinn's love, fierce and true and constant. "You're beautiful," Quinn whispered when she reached him, taking her hands in his. "Katherine, you're the most beautiful thing I've ever seen." "And you're everything I never knew I needed," she whispered back. The ceremony was simple and heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Quinn kissed her with such tenderness that Katherine heard Sue sniffling behind her. The small congregation cheered, and then they were being swept up in congratulations and well wishes, the community welcoming her fully as one of their own. The celebration that followed was held at the ranch, with tables set up in the yard and food enough to feed an army. Sue had outdone herself, cooking for days with Katherine's help, though she'd banned the bride from the kitchen that morning. There was music, fiddles and guitars, and dancing under the stars. Quinn pulled Katherine into his arms for the first dance, and she felt like she was floating. "Happy," he murmured against her ear. "Happier than I ever thought possible," Katherine replied honestly. As the evening wore on, and the celebration continued, Quinn led Katherine away from the crowd, into the house and up to the room that was now theirs, the master bedroom he'd had cleaned and prepared for them. Someone, probably Sue, had scattered wildflowers across the bed and left candles burning, casting soft light across the space. "Are you nervous?" Quinn asked softly, his hands gentle on her shoulders. Katherine was a little. Despite her age, she was innocent in the ways of marriage, and she knew Quinn knew this. But she trusted him completely. "A little," she admitted. "But I trust you, Quinn. I love you." "I love you too," he said, turning her to face him. "And I promise I'll be gentle. We have all the time in the world, Katherine. There's no rush." He kissed her then, slow and deep, and Katherine felt the last of her nervousness melt away. This was Quinn, her husband, the man she loved with all her heart. Everything else would work itself out. They loved each other that night with tenderness and patience, learning each other's bodies in the candlelight, and when Katherine finally fell asleep in Quinn's arms, she felt complete in a way she'd never experienced before. This was home. This was love. This was forever. The following months were a period of adjustment and deep joy. Katherine settled into her role as Quinn's wife and the ranch's mistress with surprising ease. She continued working with Rufus, who had become a truly excellent ranch dog, and started training 2 new puppies Quinn had acquired. She worked alongside Sue, learning more about managing a household of this size, and gradually took over more of the responsibilities as Sue's arthritis grew worse. But it was the quiet moments with Quinn that Katherine treasured most. The mornings when they woke tangled together in their bed, sunlight streaming through the windows. The evenings when they'd sit together on the porch, watching the sunset and talking about their day. The nights when they came together with passion and tenderness, learning new ways to please each other, growing closer with every touch. "I didn't know it could be like this," Quinn told her one night, holding her close after they'd made love. "This happy, this content." "You've changed my entire world, Katherine." "You changed mine first," Katherine replied, tracing patterns on his chest. "You gave me everything, Quinn. A home, a purpose, love. You saved me." "We saved each other," Quinn corrected gently. "I was just going through the motions before you arrived. Now I'm actually living." Winter came to Northern California, bringing rain and cooler temperatures, but nothing like the harsh Boston winters Katherine had grown up with. The ranch slowed its pace, the hard work of summer and fall giving way to maintenance and preparation for spring. Katherine used the quieter time to improve her riding, with Quinn as her patient teacher, and to learn more about the ranch's business side, insisting that she wanted to be a true partner to him in all things. It was in late February when Katherine realized she'd missed her monthly courses. At first, she attributed it to stress or the change in seasons, but when the nausea began and her breasts became tender, she knew. She was pregnant. The knowledge filled her with a mixture of joy and terror. She wanted Quinn's child, wanted to give him the family he'd lost so young, but pregnancy was dangerous, especially out here far from major medical facilities. Women died in childbirth all the time. What if something went wrong? Sue noticed her distress before Katherine had even told her the news. "You are with child," the older woman said one morning, watching Katherine turn green at the smell of bacon. It wasn't a question. Katherine nodded, tears springing to her eyes. "I'm scared, Sue." "Of course you are. Every woman is scared the first time." Sue took her hand, squeezing gently. "But you are strong, healthy, and I have delivered many babies. You will be fine, and Quinn will be over the moon." "I haven't told him yet. Tell him tonight. He deserves to know, and the worry is not good for you or baby." That evening, Katherine waited until they were alone in their room, Quinn reading through ranch accounts while she pretended to mend a shirt. Her hands were shaking so badly she'd pricked her finger twice. "Quinn," she said finally, setting down the sewing, "I have something to tell you." He looked up immediately, concern crossing his face. "What's wrong? You've been quiet all day." "Nothing's wrong, at least I hope you won't think it's wrong." Katherine took a deep breath. "I'm pregnant. We're going to have a baby." Quinn's face went through a series of expressions so quickly Katherine might have laughed under other circumstances. Shock, disbelief, wonder, and finally pure, incandescent joy. "A baby," he whispered. "Katherine, we're going to have a baby." She nodded, and suddenly she was in his arms, Quinn holding her so tightly she could barely breathe, and she realized he was crying. "Hey," she said softly, pulling back to see his face. "These are happy tears, right?" "The happiest," Quinn said, laughing and crying at the same time. "God, Katherine, you've given me so much already, and now this, a child, our child." He placed his hand reverently on her still flat stomach. "I'm going to be a father." "A wonderful father," Katherine assured him, her own tears flowing freely now. "The best father." They held each other and cried happy tears, and talked late into the night about their future, their child, the family they were creating together. Quinn was alternately excited and terrified, already making plans to ensure Katherine had the best care, talking about converting a room into a nursery, worrying about whether he knew anything about being a father. "You'll learn," Katherine told him. "We both will, together." The pregnancy progressed smoothly despite Katherine's initial fears. She was sick for the first few months, barely able to keep anything down, but Sue's ginger tea and Quinn's constant care got her through it. As her belly swelled with their growing child, Quinn became even more protective, trying to stop her from doing any work at all. "I'm pregnant, not an invalid," Katherine protested when he tried to carry her down the stairs one morning. "I know, but what if you fall? What if something happens?" Quinn's worry was written all over his face. "Quinn Prescott, I love you, but if you don't let me live my life, I'm going to lose my mind. I need to do things to feel useful. I promise I'll be careful, but you have to trust me to know my limits." He'd relented, though he still hovered, and Katherine found his concern more endearing than annoying. This was what love looked like, she realized. Someone caring so much that they couldn't help but worry, even when they knew they should give you space. The baby was born on a warm day in early October, almost exactly a year after Katherine and Quinn had married. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next day, and there were moments when Katherine was certain she wouldn't survive it. But Sue was there, calm and capable, guiding her through each contraction, and Quinn held her hand and let her squeeze until she thought she might break his bones. When the baby finally emerged, wailing lustily, Sue's face broke into the widest smile Katherine had ever seen. "A boy," she announced, placing the squirming, perfect infant on Katherine's chest. "A strong, healthy boy." Katherine looked down at her son, this tiny person she and Quinn had created, and felt love so overwhelming it was almost painful. He had a shock of dark hair like Quinn's, and when he opened his eyes, they were the same unusual amber brown. "He's perfect," Quinn breathed, his voice thick with emotion. "Katherine, you're amazing. He's amazing. Our son." They named him James Quinn Prescott, after Quinn's father, and he became the center of their world. Quinn was a natural father, despite his fears, tender and patient with the baby in ways that made Katherine fall in love with him all over again. She watched him walk the floor with James in the middle of the night, singing off key lullabies, and felt her heart swell with happiness. Sue doted on the baby shamelessly, declaring him the most beautiful child ever born. And even Rufus seemed to understand that James was precious, lying beside his cradle protectively and alerting Katherine whenever the baby stirred. The months after James's birth were exhausting and wonderful in equal measure. Katherine learned to function on little sleep, to nurse the baby while managing household tasks, to read James's different cries and know what he needed. Quinn helped as much as he could, taking the baby whenever Katherine needed rest, changing diapers without complaint, and being a true partner in parenting. "I can't imagine my life without you two," Quinn told her one evening, watching James sleep peacefully in his cradle. "You and James, you're everything that matters." "And you're our everything," Katherine replied, leaning into his embrace. Quinn, I never thought I could be this happy. When I came here, I was just trying to survive. Now I have a life beyond my wildest dreams." As James grew from infant to toddler, Katherine marveled at the life they'd built. The ranch prospered under Quinn's management, and with Katherine's help with the books and planning, they'd managed to expand their herd and improve their facilities. The training program Katherine had started with Rufus had grown, and she now trained dogs for other ranchers in the area, bringing in additional income and giving her a sense of purpose beyond motherhood. James was a bright, energetic child, walking early and getting into everything. He adored his father, following Quinn around the ranch whenever allowed, and Quinn was endlessly patient, teaching his son about the animals and the land with the same care Katherine had used to train Rufus. By the time James was 2, Katherine was pregnant again, and this time she was less frightened, more confident. Quinn was still protective, but he'd learned to balance his concern with respect for her capabilities. Their second child, a daughter they named Mary Grace, was born in the spring, and she was as different from James as night from day. Where James had been fussy and demanding, Mary was placid and content. She had Katherine's dark hair and delicate features, and Quinn declared her the most beautiful girl in all of California. Life settled into a comfortable rhythm. The children grew, the ranch thrived, and Katherine and Quinn's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, of course. There were harsh winters and dry summers, sick cattle and broken equipment, disagreements about money and child rearing, and 100 other things. But they faced everything together, talking through problems instead of letting resentment build, always remembering what they meant to each other. On their 5th anniversary, Quinn took Katherine back to the training pen where they'd first worked with Rufus all those years ago. The old dog was graying now, content to nap in the sun rather than chase anything, but he still perked up when he saw Katherine. "You remember the day we met?" Quinn asked, holding her close. "You were covered in dirt, wrestling with this unruly beast, and I took one look at you and thought that's the most determined woman I've ever seen." "I was terrified," Katherine admitted. "I'd been rejected everywhere else, and I thought you were going to send me away too. And then you offered me the job, and I couldn't believe my luck. Luck had nothing to do with it. You earned that job, earned your place here, and then you went and stole my heart completely." Quinn kissed her softly. "Best decision I ever made, hiring you. Second best was marrying you." "What's the third best?" Katherine asked, smiling. "Having babies with you," Quinn replied promptly. "Though I'm hoping we can manage at least 1 or 2 more of those." Katherine laughed, joy bubbling up inside her. "I think that can be arranged." They did have more children, 2 more in fact. Another boy, Thomas Michael, and finally another girl, Elizabeth Rose. The house that had once seemed too large and empty was filled with the sounds of children laughing, running, playing. Sue, now well into her 60s but still sharp as ever, helped care for the children and declared herself the luckiest grandmother in the world, even though they weren't blood-related. The ranch continued to grow and prosper. Quinn and Katherine became respected members of the community, known for their fair dealing and kind hearts. Katherine's dog training business expanded, and she became sought after throughout the region. Quinn served on the town council and helped establish a school in Willits, wanting to ensure all children, including his own, had access to education. As the years passed and the children grew, Katherine would sometimes reflect on the desperate woman who'd stumbled onto this ranch, looking for any work she could find. That woman seemed like a stranger now. The life Katherine had built here, with Quinn and their children, was richer and more fulfilling than anything her privileged Boston upbringing had offered. "You ever regret it?" Quinn asked her one evening when they were alone, the children finally asleep and the house quiet. They sat on their porch swing, the same one where he'd first told her he loved her, watching the stars emerge. Giving up your old life, the sophistication and culture of the city? Katherine considered the question, wanting to give him an honest answer. Sometimes I miss the theater, the museums, the books. But Quinn, I don't regret a single thing. That life wasn't real. It was all performance and pretense. This, she gestured to the ranch, the house full of sleeping children, the land stretching out before them. This is real. This is honest. This is love. I'd choose this life 1,000 times over. Quinn pulled her close, kissing the top of her head. I love you, Katherine Prescott, more today than yesterday, and I'll love you more tomorrow than today. That's mathematically impossible, Katherine teased, but her eyes were wet with happy tears. But I love you too, always and forever. As they sat together in the gentle darkness, Katherine thought about the strange twists of fate that had brought her to this moment. A tangled dog, a job offer, a man with kind eyes and a generous heart. Such small things, really, but they'd changed everything. Rufus had passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years ago, an old dog who'd lived a good life. But his legacy lived on in the dozens of dogs Katherine had trained since, in the program she'd built, and in the way he'd brought her and Quinn together. She liked to think the old dog had known what he was doing that day, getting himself tangled in that rope right where she'd find him. Their oldest son, James, was 12 now, already showing Quinn's height and Katherine's determination. He was learning to run the ranch, riding out with his father every day, and Quinn swelled with pride watching him. Mary was 10, quiet and bookish, always with her nose in a story, reminding Katherine so much of herself at that age. Thomas was 8, all energy and mischief, keeping everyone on their toes. And little Elizabeth was 6, the baby of the family, sweet and affectionate and adored by everyone. "What are you thinking about?" Quinn asked, reading her silence correctly. "Everything," Katherine said. "The children, the ranch, us. How lucky we are. How I almost missed all of this because I was too proud to ask for help when I first arrived in California. If I just kept walking that day instead of stopping to untangle Rufus, our whole lives would be different." "But you didn't keep walking," Quinn pointed out. "You stopped because that's who you are. You see something that needs fixing and you fix it. You saw a dog in trouble and helped him. Just like you saw a ranch that needed a woman's touch and made it a home. Just like you saw a lonely man who'd forgotten how to hope and gave him a reason to live again." "You weren't that bad," Katherine protested, but she was smiling. "I was existing, not living. There's a difference." "You taught me that." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from years of companionship and deep understanding. In the distance, Katherine could hear a coyote howling, and one of the horses whinnied in response. These were the sounds of her life now, so different from Boston's city noise, but infinitely more dear. "I want to expand the training program," Katherine said suddenly. "Really expand it. Maybe build a proper facility, bring in other trainers, make it something significant. We could train working dogs for ranches all over California, maybe even further. What do you think?" Quinn was quiet for a moment, and Katherine felt a flutter of nervousness. But when he spoke, his voice was warm with approval. "I think you're brilliant, and I think you should absolutely do it. We've got the land, the resources, and you've got the expertise. Let's make it happen." "Really? You don't think it's too much with the children and the ranch and everything else? Katherine, you've been managing everything beautifully for years. If you want to grow this business, I'll support you in every way I can. Hell, I'm proud of you for thinking big. James is old enough to take on more responsibility around here, and Mary can help with the younger kids. We'll make it work as a family." Katherine kissed him, long and deep, pouring all her love and gratitude into it. This man who'd taken a chance on a desperate stranger, who'd fallen in love with her despite the odds, who supported her dreams as much as his own. She was the luckiest woman alive. Over the next 2 years, Katherine built her training facility with Quinn's help and support. They constructed a series of pens and training areas, hired 2 young men who showed aptitude for animal work, and began taking in dogs from all over the region. Katherine developed a systematic training program, wrote detailed manuals, and became known as the best dog trainer in Northern California. The business thrived, bringing in substantial income that they reinvested in the ranch and saved for the children's futures. More importantly, it gave Katherine a sense of accomplishment and purpose beyond her roles as wife and mother, much as she loved those roles. She was building something lasting, creating a legacy. James, now 14, had discovered he had his mother's gift with animals and began working alongside her in the training facility. Katherine watched him with one of the dogs one afternoon, patient and gentle despite the animal's initial fear, and felt tears of pride prick her eyes. He was growing into a fine young man, and she knew Quinn felt the same fierce pride she did. Mary had developed a love for books and learning that led Quinn and Katherine to hire a tutor for all the children, a young woman from Sacramento who came to live with them and provide education beyond what the small-town school offered. Watching her daughter bent over Latin declensions or mathematical equations, Katherine was glad she could give her children opportunities she'd once taken for granted. Thomas and Elizabeth were still young enough to be more interested in play than work, but they helped around the ranch in small ways, learning responsibility and the value of hard work. The whole family functioned as a unit, each person contributing according to their abilities, and Katherine loved the sense of purpose it created. Sue, now 72, had finally agreed to retire from heavy work, though she still supervised the kitchen and doted on the children. Quinn and Katherine had hired a young woman named Alice to help with cooking and cleaning, but Sue remained a vital part of their family, her wisdom and experience invaluable. On a warm evening in late summer, when Katherine was 32 and Quinn 39, they hosted a celebration to mark the 10th anniversary of their marriage. Friends and neighbors from all over the region came to join the festivities. Tables were laden with food, musicians played lively tunes, and children ran wild in the gathering darkness, their laughter ringing out. Thomas, the old foreman who'd been there from the beginning, stood to make a toast. "I've known Quinn since he was a boy," Thomas said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. "Watched him grow up, watched him take on this ranch when his daddy passed. He was a good man then, but he was a lonely man. And then Katherine came along and everything changed. She didn't just make him happy, she made him whole. And she made this ranch a real home, not just a place of work. So here's to Katherine and Quinn, to 10 years of marriage and 50 more to come." Everyone cheered and drank, and Katherine felt Quinn's arm come around her waist, pulling her close. "Happy anniversary, my love," he murmured in her ear. "Happy anniversary," Katherine replied, turning to kiss him despite their audience. She didn't care who saw. This man was her heart, and she'd never been ashamed to show it. As the party continued around them, Katherine took a moment to really look at her life. 4 beautiful children, healthy and happy. A thriving ranch and a successful business. Friends and community. And most of all, a love that had only grown stronger and deeper with each passing year. "What are you thinking?" Quinn asked, the question he'd asked her 1,000 times before. "That I'm grateful," Katherine said simply. "For all of it. For you most of all, you gave me a chance when no one else would, Quinn. You saw something in me worth believing in. You gave me everything, Quinn countered. Love, family, purpose, joy. Katherine, you're the best thing that ever happened to me. We're the best thing that ever happened to each other, Katherine said and kissed him again. The years continued to pass, marked by the usual joys and sorrows of life. They lost Sue when Katherine was 35, and the whole family mourned the woman who'd been grandmother, friend, and mentor. But they celebrated her long life and the legacy of love she'd left behind. The children grew and began making their own ways in the world. James took over more and more of the ranch operations, working alongside Quinn and showing a keen business sense that promised well for the future. Mary, brilliant and determined, announced she wanted to attend college, a rare ambition for a woman, but one Katherine and Quinn supported wholeheartedly. They sent her to San Francisco to study, and though they missed her terribly, they were proud beyond measure. Thomas decided he wanted to be a veterinarian, inspired by his mother's work with animals, and began apprenticing with the town doctor to learn basic medical skills. Elizabeth, the baby, showed an artistic talent that had them sending away for paints and canvases, her paintings soon decorating every room of the house. Quinn's hair began to gray at the temples, making him look distinguished, Katherine teased. Her own hair remained dark, but for a few silver threads she didn't bother hiding. They were both older, a little slower, but no less in love. "You remember what you said to me that first day?" Katherine asked Quinn one evening as they walked their property, something they still did regularly. "When you offered me the job," Quinn thought back, a smile crossing his face. "If you can train him, you can work here. Simple as that. My whole life changed because of those words." "Our whole lives changed," Quinn corrected. "I got just as much out of that deal as you did, probably more." Katherine leaned into him as they walked, comfortable after so many years together. "I think we both got exactly what we needed. I needed someone to believe in me, and you needed someone to share your life with." "I needed you," Quinn said simply. "I just didn't know it until you showed up covered in dirt, wrestling with my unruly dog." They laughed together, the sound carrying across the peaceful evening landscape. Ahead of them, they could see the house, lights glowing warmly in the windows, smoke curling from the chimney. Home in every sense of the word. By the time Katherine was 45, she and Quinn were grandparents. James had married a sweet girl from town and given them 2 grandsons. Mary had graduated from college with honors and married a professor, settling in San Francisco but visiting regularly. Thomas was studying veterinary medicine, and Elizabeth, now 16, was being courted by a young man from a neighboring ranch, much to Quinn's consternation and Katherine's amusement. "He's too old for her," Quinn grumbled, watching the young man help Elizabeth down from his wagon. "He's 19, Quinn. You were 28 when we married, and I was 21. That's a bigger gap. That's different." "How?" "Because she's my little girl," Quinn said, and there was such genuine distress in his voice that Katherine had to kiss him. "She's growing up. We have to let her." "But I promise, if he's not good enough for her, we'll send him packing." Elizabeth did marry her young man, a rancher's son named Daniel, and they settled on his family's property just 10 miles away. The wedding was beautiful, held at the ranch with half the county in attendance, and Katherine cried happy tears watching her youngest daughter pledge her life to the man she loved. "We did good," Quinn said, watching Elizabeth dance with her new husband. "All our kids turned out pretty damn wonderful." "They did," Katherine agreed. "We were lucky, and we worked hard. Both things can be true." As they entered their 50s, Quinn and Katherine gradually stepped back from the day-to-day operations of the ranch and the training facility, letting James and his wife take over more responsibility. They traveled some, taking a trip to San Francisco to visit Mary and her growing family, even venturing as far as Oregon to see the Northern Territories. But they always came home to the ranch, to the land that had brought them together and sustained them for so many years. They spent their days in each other's company, sometimes working in the expanded gardens Katherine had created, sometimes riding out to check on the cattle just for the pleasure of it, often simply sitting on their porch swing and watching the world go by. "Do you know what I love most about our life?" Katherine asked Quinn one evening when they were both 57, the sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "What's that?" "That we built it together. Every single piece of it. The ranch, the training facility, our children, all of it. We were partners in the truest sense." Quinn took her hand, his grip still strong despite his age. "We were, we are, we always will be. I love you, Quinn Prescott. I have since the day you offered me that job, though I didn't quite realize it then. I love you too, Katherine. My beautiful, brilliant, stubborn wife who took a chance on a lonely rancher and his unruly dog." They sat together as the sun set, the same way they'd sat together countless times before, and Katherine felt utterly at peace. She'd been searching for survival when she came to this ranch all those years ago, but she'd found so much more. She'd found home. She'd found purpose. She'd found love that had sustained her through every challenge and celebrated every joy. Most of all, she'd found herself. The woman she was always meant to be, strong and capable and deeply loved. Years later, when Katherine was 63 and Quinn 70, they sat on that same porch swing surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. The ranch had passed to James, who ran it with the same care and dedication Quinn had. The training facility was now managed by one of their grandsons, who'd inherited Katherine's gift with animals. The Prescott name was respected throughout California, synonymous with quality cattle, well-trained dogs, and honest dealing. "Tell us the story again, Grandma," one of the great-grandchildren pleaded. "About how you and Grandpa met." Katherine smiled, exchanging a look with Quinn. They'd told this story dozens of times, but it never got old. "Well," Katherine began, "it all started with a very naughty dog named Rufus who got himself tangled in a rope." As she told the familiar tale, Quinn's hand found hers, their fingers intertwining automatically after more than 40 years of marriage. The children listened with rapt attention, even though they'd heard it all before, enchanted by the romance of it. When the story ended with Quinn's proposal in the rain, the children sighed happily. "That's the best story ever," the youngest great-grandchild declared. "It is," Katherine agreed, looking at Quinn with eyes still full of love. "Because it's true, and because it gave us all of this. Our family, our home, our life together." That night, after all the children had gone home and the house was quiet, Katherine and Quinn prepared for bed with the comfortable routine of decades. As they settled under the quilts Katherine had made years ago, Quinn pulled her close. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" "For stopping that day. For untangling Rufus. For taking a chance on a job that probably seemed beneath you. For loving me. For giving me a family and a life I never dreamed possible. For everything, Katherine. Thank you for everything." Katherine felt tears prick her eyes, happy tears that came so easily these days. "Thank you for seeing me. For believing in me when I didn't believe in myself. For loving me so completely and so well. For being my partner in all things. I would do it all again, Quinn. Every single moment." They held each other in the darkness, two people who'd found each other against all odds and built something beautiful together. Outside, the ranch slept peacefully, the land they'd worked and loved and passed on to future generations. Inside, in the warmth of their bed and their love, Katherine and Quinn found the same peace they'd always found in each other's arms. The story that had begun with a tangled dog and a desperate woman and a lonely man had become something far greater than any of them could have imagined. It had become a legacy of love, family, hard work, and partnership. It had become proof that sometimes the worst moments in life lead to the best outcomes, that taking a chance on someone can change everything, and that love, true love, endures. As Katherine drifted off to sleep that night, Quinn's heart beat steady beneath her ear. She thought about the scared girl she'd been when she arrived in Willits so many years ago. If she could go back and tell that girl what was waiting for her, that girl would never have believed it. A man who would love her unconditionally, children who would make her proud, a home that would shelter generations, a purpose that would fulfill her, and a love story that would be told and retold by their descendants. All because she'd stopped to help a dog in trouble and a cowboy had been watching. Quinn's breathing had evened out, and Katherine knew he was asleep. She pressed a kiss to his chest and closed her own eyes, grateful beyond measure for every day they'd been given together. Their story was a beautiful one, full of love and laughter and the kind of happiness that comes from building a life with your true partner, and it was far from over. There were still mornings to wake up together, still grandchildren to spoil, still sunsets to watch from their porch swing, still moments to steal away together, still words of love to exchange, still years to add to their story. Quinn Prescott, formerly Katherine Dawson of Boston, had found everything she'd ever needed on a dusty California ranch with a man named Quinn and a dog named Rufus. She'd found home and love, and a happily ever after that was better than any fairy tale because it was real and earned and built on trust and partnership and genuine affection. As she slipped into sleep, held safe in Quinn's arms, Katherine smiled. Their story was one for the ages, proof that love could be found in the most unexpected places, that second chances were real, and that sometimes, just sometimes, everything worked out exactly as it should. And somewhere in the house, in a frame on the mantel, sat a photograph of Rufus in his prime, the dog who'd brought them together, forever immortalized as the furry matchmaker who changed two lives with a simple tangle of rope. The children always laughed at the picture, but Katherine and Quinn knew the truth. That dog had been the beginning of everything good in their lives, and they'd never forget it. Their love story, which had started with, "If you can train him, you can work here," had bloomed into something neither of them could have predicted, but both of them cherished beyond measure. It was a story of taking chances, of seeing potential in others, of opening your heart when it seemed safest to keep it closed. It was a story of the American West in all its harsh beauty, of building something from nothing, of family and legacy and enduring love. Most of all, it was their story, and it was perfect,